there's a little like sort of warm security blanket when you think of, well, if they don't eat, fill in the blank today, it's fine. They're going to get a vitamin. And I'm going to call bologna sandwich on that. Welcome to the Lunchbox Reformation with Dr. Liz. This podcast is for folks who are craving better nutrition for their kids, but are tired of the whiplash of nutrition claims and diet culture influence. You're reading labels, paying attention to ingredients, but you still doubt yourself, and for good reason. Food goes deep, and often we fear making costly mistakes that as parents we hope to prevent. If you're ready to explore the ins and outs of your child's actual nutrition needs and nourish the whole child from the inside out, hang with me, Dr. Liz Daniels. I'm a board-certified pediatrician plus registered dietitian, and we're going to dig deep into real-deal nutrition science, honest talk about barriers to health, and real stories that I help address. So let's dig in. Hey guys, what's up? Thanks for joining me today on the Lunchbox Reformation. Today we're going to talk about the multivitamin versus the picky eater. I'm going to give you my take on what the best multivitamin is, and you might want to stick around till the end because my answer might surprise you. Have you ever found yourself wandering down the grocery aisle and stopping in the multivitamin aisle just thinking, oh, yeah, I probably ought to. My kid is such a picky eater. Or, man, all my friends like this one. Maybe I should give it a try. Well, I've been there, and I've even fallen for it. And you know what? What if I told you that in the overwhelming majority of toddlers and kids, yes, even the picky ones, most multivitamins really aren't worth it? Today, I want to break that down in greater detail on what multivitamins actually have inside them, what they don't, and how to confidently peruse the aisle without having second thoughts. As we get into the nitty-gritty, it's going to feel uncomfortable to most parents. And, even for you, if you listen to the whole podcast, it's possible that you could feel resistance to what I have to say and still keep giving your kids multivitamins in the end. And you know what? If you do, I won't judge you. But I want to offer you a strong alternative. And I want to empower you to look a little deeper into what is in your pantry and think about some simple ways that maybe you're already doing a great job. It's something that requires, I think, a little bit more explanation than me simply saying to somebody in the office, yeah, I don't think your kid needs it. Well, what's your natural response? You haven't seen my kid eat, And to that end, that's what I want to do today. Today, I'm going to talk through what's commonly in multivitamins, ingredient by ingredient, how much you need, where to get that in food, and how much is actually in the multivitamin. We're going to compare that also with a sample menu of a real toddler. And I'm going to break that down and show you kind of how much they're actually getting from a nutrition standpoint when we look at it and think that might be just junk. Okay. So without further ado, let's talk about it. All righty. And here's the other thing. If you have a toddler, remember that the first year of life, you knew exactly what they consumed. You actually, looking back on it, probably spent hours figuring out what formula you were going to use if you used any, and analyzing all of the different prenatal vitamins that you would be taking even while you're breastfeeding, if that was your choice, and even longer planning what their first solids were. You could have even taken a course on that. I mean, there's so much out there now. There's so many more options than there were in the years past. And so I think that while that's beneficial, I think sometimes it actually, reinforces to parents that they should worry. I heard once a psychologist who I really adored, a child psychologist, say, I said, okay, you have a toddler who's suddenly afraid of monsters in the closet, and you turn the flashlight on to go show them, you're just reinforcing that there's actually something to be afraid of. What would it look like if you just said, well, you want to make a joke? You want to learn a knock-knock joke for the monster? Maybe they'll be your friend. And the kid obviously knows you're teasing, right? It's a similar kind of concept, I think, that marketing companies and multivitamin companies, while I do think there can be a role for them, the overwhelming majority is that they're actually not that necessary. And so I think what they do is reinforce parents feeling like they're not doing enough or their kid's not doing a good enough job, and therefore they have to rescue them. let's just go down that rabbit hole because you have a toddler now and you can no longer analyze every little thing they're doing or eating. You used to be totally in control of their nutrition. And now, you're lucky if you get any at all. You can cut the peanut butter sandwich that they've had 42 times the wrong way, even though it's the same way you always do it. And you're going to get a tantrum. The opposition and the moving target of their preferences these days as a toddler is really erratic and it's unpredictable. And so it feels really stressful as a parent. And there's a little sort of warm security blanket when you think of, well, if they don't eat, fill in the blank today, it's fine. They're going to get a vitamin. And I'm going to call bologna sandwich on that. Okay. So what do our kids actually need for growth? If you listen to this podcast for a while, you already know that they probably are going to benefit from milk and that they need protein, but not too much. Well, what about the micronutrients? The little things, right? Well, they do need calcium. So calcium is important for bone health, as most people understand. It's also really important for electrolytes, and it serves a lot of different roles in enzymatic functions. So anyway, we need about 700 milligrams. 1 cup of milk offers about 300. So once again, here I am claiming that kids need 2 cups of milk. Okay. In those 2 cups, they're going to get roughly all their calcium needs. How much does a multivitamin have, you ask? Well, most of them have none. Or if they do, very, very little. It's very bulky and it doesn't really go well in most vitamins, especially if it's a gummy. So calcium, food 1, multivitamin 0. Okay, let's go to iron. Iron in a toddler, they're going to need about 7 milligrams. Remember the PB&J? Well, that's about 3 milligrams if they eat the thing. A half a cup of beans, and this is pretty close with most beans, whether you compare it to navy or black or refried or any of those, you're going to see that have about 3 more grams of iron in it. 3 ounces of ground beef, 2.5 milligrams. Okay, so in our food, we're doing okay. What about our supplements? Well, most of them have none, unless you specifically look for it. Again, the gummy vitamins, nada. Okay, well, so back to the scoreboard here. Food, 1. Multivitamin, 0. All right, let's look at vitamin D. In a toddler, they need about 600 IU. 2 cups of milk offers you about 225 IU. 3 ounces of salmon, you say? 500 IU. Outside of that, it's kind of hard to get vitamin D. There are some select foods like sun-dried mushrooms and some other fish sources, as well as vitamin D fortified items. But at the end of the day, that one is actually kind of tricky to get. So a multivitamin, 600 IU. And on this one, food, we're going to go with a half. And multivitamin, 1. Okay. So multivitamin got a score there. Let's go on to one of the other things that I think kids really need in the toddler years. Omega-3 fatty acids. They need about 0.7 grams or 700 milligrams, depending on how you like to think about it. Hemp seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds. Most of those seeds have about 500 milligrams per tablespoon. If you happen to get grass-fed beef or grass-fed chicken, grass-fed egg, like the egg from free-range chickens, they're going to be a little higher in their omegas as well. So check the box. If you get a multivitamin, none. Most multivitamins don't contain omega-3 fatty acids. If you specifically look for an omega-3, then, which you can certainly do, the only downside here is that they're about $1 a dose. So they add up, especially when you've got multiple kids. So once again, scoreboard, food, 1, multivitamin, 0. Okay, so far, not finding many great reasons for multivitamin. Let's move on to fiber. Okay, in the traditional American diet, especially for toddlers, that's an area we really struggle. The recommendation is to get about 19 grams of fiber. So according to most studies right now, some of the more recent studies, about 7 to 11.5 grams of fiber daily is pretty common for most toddlers. That's actually pretty reflective of adult American diets as well. And so I'm just going to camp out here for a minute that when your toddler's asking for crackers or wants the grains and the fruit, those are pretty good. Now, the best sources of fiber that we often overlook are actually going to be in beans or legumes. So I really love those and highly recommend them. But, in a lot of toddlers in general, that's going to be something that actually we sometimes struggle to get enough of. Now, that said, thinking about a multivitamin, there's no fiber in multivitamin. So, spoiler alert on this one, I'm going to say American diet, probably a 0, and multivitamin 0. So, in total, I bring it up because I think that we benefit from having a little attention on getting that in our diet rather than some of the other ingredients that are already present. So, overall, the things that we need to have for our kids for growth are overwhelmingly not in the multivitamin. So let's think a little bit more about some of the other ingredients that the multivitamin does have. Okay, let's look at that. On the back of the multivitamins, you're typically going to see vitamins A, C, D, E, K, plus a lot of B vitamins and some minerals such as zinc, choline, iodine, pantothenic acid, selenium. They're all going to be present on the multivitamin label. So while that's really exciting to see, I just want to remind you that in America, at least, fortified grains, right now currently deemed processed grains, are actually fortified with B vitamins, iron, and zinc. So 2 slices of bread have pretty much the same amount of the B vitamins that you're going to be looking for in a multivitamin. Pretty impressive. Most toddlers I know are getting about 2 slices of bread a day, if not more, or they're getting it in the form of other fortified grains like cereals, crackers, pretzels, tortillas. Any of those processed grains are going to be having that added back in. So I think that's pretty nice to know that it's in the multivitamin, but it's honestly not something that we really need to be supplementing with because naturally toddlers' diets are going to have that in them already. So what about some of the other ones? Let's look at vitamin A. For growth for a toddler, we need about 300 micrograms of vitamin A. And in most foods, you're going to be seeing this in terms of a toddler diet in the dairy sources because in America, milk has vitamin A fortified into it. So that's pretty awesome. The other thing you'll see that in is in other animal sources. So like cheeses as well as eggs and some beef, you'll be able to see a good amount of vitamin A. You'll see beta carotene, which is a precursor to vitamin A in your yellow, green, and orange fruits and veggies. And so they usually get plenty. Now, let's look at C and E. Those are going to be found in, C is going to be found pretty readily in almost all the fruits. Vitamin E actually is much richer in seeds, which sometimes isn't always present in a toddler diet. And so, that said, you're going to get plenty in a multivitamin. One little note about vitamin E is while in an analysis of toddler diets, it's pretty common to see kids not quite meet that if they're eating a lot of packaged foods. However, vitamin E, like a true vitamin E deficiency, is so incredibly rare, like so incredibly rare. And I mean, I've personally never seen it. And I've had a lot of exposure to, I've been doing this a while. So, I would argue we're not missing much here. So just getting even deeper into some of the minerals, zinc, choline, iodine, pantothenic acid, selenium, actually, those are going to be met again with any of the other foods that we're already talking about and eating. So to summarize, in my opinion, the micronutrients that kids really need and really benefit from are actually often not in the multivitamins. And the things that are in the multivitamins are often in great abundance in the things that they're already eating really well. So for me, I don't offer these to my kids. I never did when they were little. And I feel pretty confident that we're doing okay as long as my kids are regularly getting variety in their diet. In our household, my kids do still proudly drink milk, and we do eat fish in our diet. So those are things that I tend to recommend. And the other heroes here that I referenced, but I want to remind you, are beans and seeds. Really, really valuable things to add to your diet. Okay. All right, Dr. Liz. So I hear you. You think multivitamins are worthless. Yes, got it. Well, okay, but is there any harm in offering the multivitamins? I mean, what if it just makes me feel better? Okay, so fine. And you might be right, especially if you don't remember them every day. But you know what? There actually can be a little bit of risk in doing that, especially if your kid's diet is actually really diverse. And for this, while it's pretty uncommon to see any toxicities, I would just mention that they actually can overdo it with some multivitamins on board. Interestingly, vitamin A can actually be pretty easy to obtain. And so there is a chance that we'll reach the upper limit. And in the sample menu I'm going to go over in just a minute, that happened. So I tend to not recommend them simply because it's actually more than what my kid would need. Okay. The multivitamin would put me in a place where now they're getting more vitamin A than they actually need for growth. Additionally, they would also get extra zinc. Is that super problematic? Not really, but one caveat is that zinc interferes with iron absorption. And actually, my kid really does need to absorb the iron in their diet. So while you're not going to have a problem by having extra zinc once in a while, if it's regularly a part of your diet, it really can interfere with the other nutrients that you need to be able to absorb from your diet that are also, by the way, not in your multivitamin. So in this situation, it actually is doing you more harm than good. Okay. And then last but not least, selenium. So selenium is actually selenium has a value, but in the toddler diet I'm going to go through with you, that diet actually already met the selenium needs. And then we got an extra 20 micrograms from the multivitamin, which actually put us pretty close to the upper limit for that day. So again, in my take, I would say that in the typical toddler diet that I'm going to offer you, this kiddo and this diet for this day really was getting more harm from the multivitamin than good. All right. So what was I feeding that kid and what did I recommend? So in a sample menu from a toddler I know, they got in the morning a slice of French toast, which was made with whole grain bread and an egg. They ate the whole thing. Hooray! They also had about 3 ounces of Greek yogurt and about a 1/4 cup of blueberries for breakfast. They were pretty hungry, and breakfast tends to be their best meal, so that was a win. For daycare that day, they got a Go-Go Squeeze yogurt pouch and a bag of Teddy Grahams for their snack. They ate most of those. Then later that day for lunch, they were offered meatballs and macaroni and cheese. They ate 1 meatball and had in total about a 1/4 cup of macaroni and cheese. They also had a snack later that day where they ate a whole mandarin orange. Then at nighttime, they just weren't as hungry, so they ended up having a couple bites of, once again, some mac and cheese because it had been prepared, a single chicken nugget, and 2 strawberries. To round out the whole day, what had been offered during daycare, and they ate at dinner, totaled about 16 ounces of whole milk. And they really consumed a little under that, so closer to like the 10-ish to 12 ounce mark. And in that day, that actually offered this kiddo all their calorie needs. Their protein needs were actually double what they actually needed for growth. And they got plenty of calcium, B12, riboflavin. And the only thing that really came out under the RDA for that kid that day was, you guessed it, what did I already allude to earlier? Fiber and a little bit of vitamin D. So in this toddler diet, what would have made it a little bit healthier, you wonder? And I would actually go back and say whole grains, beans. the things that I actually suggest. I think they're really, really great, and they're often underrated. They can be really helpful even in the form if your kid really likes crunchy stuff. So for example, edamame, like the crunchy edamame is really good. And they can be in the form of other bean-based chips or snacks these days. So there's offering there as well. So I just put it out there. One other thing that I would say, if a family really wanted to do it, they really could even consider something like a tofu or soy products. Some families like to do that instead of meat, for example, and that can be a nice little way to get a little bit of subtle fiber in there. You just have to be conscientious that you're doing complementary proteins when you are on a plant-based diet. So for what it's worth, that's my hot take. Bottom line, I don't think you need the multivitamin, even if you have a picky eater. I also think that most kids do really, really well, even if you just give them the space to get hungry enough to try some different things. Now, if that's not true for you, it's time to have a conversation. If you still are listening to this and you're like, oh, I still think my kid really needs it, that's okay. Again, I'm not going to judge you. I just like you to understand that there actually are sometimes more risk with a multivitamin than the benefit. Okay, Dr. Liz, I hear you. So if you're not going to do multivitamin, do you do anything else? What are your wins, or how do you know what to help your toddler with when they won't eat anything? And for that, I love to encourage you that time and observation are really, really key, because there's probably something that they will eat, and then we can optimize that. There really are kind of three things that I do think that in an American diet we tend to not get enough of, and that is fiber, vitamin D, and omega-3 fatty acids, plus or minus iron, depending on what else is going on in the diet. So I really, really love to encourage, as I already mentioned, milk and fish. I kept the milk going in my house when they were young, and I encouraged it. And there were seasons where they weren't huge on it, but sometimes we would do things to make the milk taste a little better. Sometimes it was with cereal, and then the cereal sat there and they would drink the milk. Sometimes we made chocolate milk. Sometimes I just made smoothies and they got the milk in there. That's how I was really focusing on their vitamin D. I also really happen to love fish, but my kids had to learn how to like it. When they got a little older, they really started to like sushi because my husband loved sushi. And so that was one way that we would get fish in their diet. For the omegas, I found that when my kids were little, and even still to this day, I make protein balls pretty regularly. In those, and if you're curious, I happen to have a recipe on my Instagram platform, but I'm sure you have one you've already used before or can find one. It's essentially your oatmeal, peanut butter, honey, chocolate chips, sometimes coconut. And I often, one of my staples that I'm always putting in there is ground flaxseed and hemp seed. And when I make that, my kids love them, and I change it up. Sometimes I put sprinkles in. Sometimes I do dates. So when I want to make sure that my kids are, if I feel like we're not getting enough nutrition, or they're lacking, or they're eating a bunch of processed foods and I worry about the quality of it, I go to that recipe and I make my protein balls. I think about getting fish in their diet. I think about making sure there's milk. And then for the best for fiber, I like to add beans. We make tacos often, and beans are usually regularly added. In our household, I don't tend to think that my kids need multivitamins, nor do I buy supplements for them. I just make sure that the foods that I'm offering have enough diversity in them, and I can consistently provide diversity with my protein balls, some fish, and my milk. And for those of you out there who are like, ooh, that's bougie, I just want to remind you that when my kids were little, we were in a really tough place financially when we were on WIC and food stamps. And most of the foods that my kids benefited from were the fish that we would buy was often canned. And I still go back and do that now. So I just want to mention that it is intentional, and it does come from that modeling. But if you're interested and curious as a parent, then it may be worth trying. I would love to hear if there's any recipes like that have worked well for you and your household. I would love to know what it is that you really like. Maybe it's the summertime and you guys like to plant a little garden and you like to grow some things. Wonderful, amazing. I mean, there's so much out there. There's so many ways to go about diversifying our foods. And I just want to encourage you all to think of one way that you might be able to get one of those ingredients in your diet this week, whether that's fiber, vitamin D, whether it's omega-3 fatty acids. Try it and see. Let me know what you think. I hope this episode of the Lunchbox Reformation resonated with you. If it did, please hit subscribe or follow and share a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. See you next week.